In a candlelit room, the air is thick with the scent of wax and decay. A body lies on a stone slab, half draped in linen, its chest carefully opened. Around it, students peer forward, some clutching notes, others struggling to hide discomfort. At the center stands a man in his early 20s, holding a scalpel as if it were a quill. With precise, deliberate movements, he cuts, not out of cruelty, but out of obsession. This is the story of Andreas Vesalius. What he's doing is more than anatomy. It's a quiet rebellion against centuries of blind faith. In an era where questioning ancient texts was akin to heresy, Vesalius was tearing open the very foundation of European medicine, one swift cut of his knife at a time. Andreas Vesalius was born in Brussels in 1514 into a family steeped in medicine and court politics. His father, Andreas van Vezele, served as apothecary to Emperor Charles V, ensuring that the young Andreas grew up surrounded by tinctures, tonics, and the heavy Latin texts of Galenic medicine. As a child, Vesalius showed signs of obsession not just with books, but with bodies. He disassembled small animals, reconstructed bird skeletons, and sketched his findings. For most boys, this would have been dismissed as morbid curiosity. But for Vesalius, it was the start of a methodical pursuit of knowledge grounded in the tangible. At 15, he enrolled at the University of Leuven. Soon after, he transferred to the more prestigious University of Paris, where he officially began his study of medicine. There, he encountered the standard academic method of the time. A professor reading aloud from Galen's Anatomy, while an assistant, usually untrained, pointed to presumed equivalents on a human cadaver. The contradiction became glaringly clear to Vesalius. Galen had never dissected a human body. Roman law forbade it. His conclusions, though brilliant for their time, were drawn from animals: monkeys, dogs, pigs, and riddled with anatomical assumptions. But in the universities of Europe, Galen's word was sacrosanct. Challenging him was not simply academic arrogance, it bordered on blasphemy. Still, Vesalius couldn't ignore what he saw. He started quietly noting discrepancies. The human liver had fewer lobes than Galen claimed. The jawbone wasn't composed of two halves. The heart chambers were arranged differently. These weren't small errors. They were foundational misunderstandings. And if the foundation was flawed, how many lives had been lost under the illusion of correctness? When a student is denied answers, they look elsewhere. And so Vesalius took to the peripheries of society. By night, he scoured cemeteries and charnel houses, bribing gravediggers and executioners. He gathered bones from gallows and battlefields, assembled skeletons in secret, and practiced crude dissections with stolen corpses. At first, it was simple observation. Then it became systematic study. In these moments, Vesalius wasn't just questioning Galen. He was constructing a rival understanding from the ground up. The body became a text he could read directly. Each tendon was a sentence, each nerve a contradiction. It wasn't enough to memorize diagrams. He wanted to understand how the body actually worked. He began sketching what he saw. His drawings, though rough at first, were precise, based not on speculation, but on what lay beneath his own hands. Over time, he refined his technique. The dissections became cleaner, the illustrations more detailed. Word spread. Some colleagues found him dangerous. Others, quietly intrigued, asked to observe. He taught in whispered tones, behind locked doors. Yet with every dissection, his confidence grew, and his patience for orthodoxy thinned. In 1537, Vesalius earned his doctorate at the University of Padua, a city-state in the Republic of Venice that held a rare tolerance for intellectual freedom. Only 23 years old, he was appointed professor of surgery and anatomy. An unprecedented move for someone so young. At Padua, Vesalius had what he lacked elsewhere: permission. He immediately began offering public dissections, not with a distant reader and a passive assistant, but with himself wielding the knife. Crowds gathered, students packed the anatomical theater, some standing shoulder to shoulder on wooden balconies to catch a glimpse. What they saw was revolutionary. Vesalius narrated the body as he revealed it, methodically opening skin, muscle, and bone. He didn't recite from Galen. He questioned him. He pointed out each mismatch between what the ancient text said and what the corpse showed. He explained the function of the heart by its actual chambers, not imagined ones. He traced nerves and veins by sight, not scripture. He used comparative anatomy sparingly, emphasizing that truth must be verified through direct observation. To modern ears, it may sound clinical, but at the time, it was explosive. Here was a professor not relying on ancient authority, but building a new one through the evidence of his own hands. And his students, future physicians, surgeons, and scholars, carried his method with them. The more Vesalius dissected, the more he realized his observations demanded permanence. A single dissection could teach a handful of students. A book could teach a continent. But it couldn't be just any book. Vesalius wanted to produce a definitive anatomical text that would replace Galen once and for all. It would contain not only detailed descriptions, but visual proof. Drawings based on actual human anatomy, not inherited myth. He began collaborating with artists from the Venetian school, men trained in perspective, proportion, and lifelike detail. Some historians suggest they were linked to Titian's workshop, though their names remain unknown. Together, Vesalius and his artists created over 200 anatomical plates, each meticulously rendered. Muscles, bones, organs, and tendons were presented in full, often layered in sequential images to show the body being unwrapped step by step. To avoid censorship, Vesalius obtained permission from the Venetian Senate to publish. In 1543, at the age of 28, he released De Humani Corporis Fabrica, on the fabric of the human body. It was a masterpiece. Printed in Basel, the book spanned over 700 pages and 7 volumes. It wasn't just a medical manual, it was a declaration of intellectual independence. And in it, Vesalius did the unthinkable. He called out Galen by name. The publication of the Fabrica shook the medical world. Some hailed it as the beginning of a new era. Anatomy, finally corrected by evidence rather than dogma. Students and surgeons pored over its illustrations, comparing them against their own dissections. For many, it was the first time they saw what the body actually looked like. But not everyone celebrated. Traditionalists, especially those entrenched in university medicine, saw Vesalius as a dangerous upstart. Galen's defenders accused him of arrogance, even sacrilege. Theological critics hinted that dissecting the human body was a desecration of God's creation. In more conservative territories, the book was banned. In other places, it was placed on restricted shelves, chained to desks in libraries, accessible only with permission. And yet, it spread. Copies were smuggled across borders. Translations followed. Secret anatomy clubs began using it as their Bible. Even those who hated Vesalius couldn't deny the Fabrica's brilliance. Still, Vesalius himself was growing weary. He had stood in the spotlight for years, teaching, defending, fighting. Now, as controversy swirled around him, he faced a new dilemma: whether to continue his revolutionary path or to retreat into safety. By 1544, Vesalius stood at the height of his influence. De Humani Corporis Fabrica had made him famous across Europe. But fame brings pressure, and pressure alters men. He was summoned to serve as court physician to Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. It was an honor that placed him alongside kings, princes, and papal envoys. He traded the dissection theater of Padua for the opulent but sterile halls of imperial politics. At first, he believed he could influence medicine from within power. But court life proved suffocating. Diplomacy mattered more than truth. Etiquette mattered more than knowledge. And healing the powerful required more flattery than skill. He was no longer cutting into muscle and bone. Instead, he was prescribing tonics and managing royal migraines. Though he had once publicly challenged Galen, Vesalius now found himself expected to remain quiet in polite society. In an age of religious upheaval, Protestants challenging Catholic dominance, heretics burned across borders, open defiance of tradition became dangerous. And Vesalius had enemies. Older physicians who clung to Galen's teachings accused him of overstepping. Some whispered that he was a butcher masquerading as a scholar. Others warned that his dissections bordered on impiety, even necromancy. Vesalius, once the brash rebel of Padua, began to pull back. He performed fewer dissections, he published little. His once defiantly open knife grew still. Rumors began to circulate, not just professional critiques, but accusations that carried real peril. One story, likely exaggerated but widely repeated, claimed that Vesalius had dissected a nobleman who was still alive, that his heart was still beating when his chest was opened. Another alleged he had desecrated sacred remains during his anatomical investigations. Whether these were invented by rivals or embellished by fearful onlookers, they were enough to catch the attention of the Spanish Inquisition. Spain, under King Philip II, Charles V's successor, was increasingly hostile to any deviation from Catholic orthodoxy. And anatomy, especially when it challenged divine creation, was a target. To defend himself, Vesalius needed powerful allies. He turned to the court and relied on his old reputation. Still, the scrutiny stung. He had built his life on the pursuit of observable truth, yet he now stood on trial, informally, subtly, for simply trying to learn. Though no formal charges were brought, the message was clear: remain quiet or face destruction. To appease the court and perhaps his conscience, Vesalius promised a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. It was a gesture of piety, a public symbol of submission to the spiritual order he had long resisted in private. Behind it, however, was a deeper fatigue. The body he had spent his life revealing was now a source of suspicion. The world wasn't ready to follow him deeper. In 1564, Vesalius boarded a ship bound for the Holy Land. He was 50 years old, worn by years of court service and intellectual battles. The voyage was harsh. Crossing the Mediterranean in summer was always perilous. Storms, disease, pirates. His vessel stopped in Cyprus, then sailed toward Syria. Along the way, he may have visited shrines, delivered medical aid to the sick, or simply tried to fulfill the vows he had made under political pressure. But he never returned home. On his way back from Jerusalem, Vesalius's ship was wrecked near the island of Zakynthos, off the Greek coast. Stranded, sick, and exhausted, he died shortly after. Some accounts suggest starvation, others hint at dysentery. A few claim he died in a monastery. The exact cause remains unclear. Even the location of his burial is uncertain. How ironic that the man who sought to give the body clarity should vanish into mystery. For a time after his death, Vesalius's legacy lay dormant. Traditionalists still controlled most universities. His Fabrica remained read by a minority of scholars, often behind closed doors. His drawings were admired, but his method, dissection guided by direct observation, was not yet dominant. But ideas, once born, are hard to bury. In the decades following his death, European science began to shift. The Renaissance was blooming into something more dangerous: empiricism. The rise of figures like William Harvey, who discovered the circulation of blood, and Galileo Galilei, who mapped the heavens through observation, owed part of their mindset to Vesalius. The knife he had wielded had opened not just bodies, but minds. Medical schools began using cadavers regularly. Anatomical theaters multiplied across Europe, and Vesalius's anatomical plates were copied, pirated, and reprinted, sometimes with false names to avoid persecution. In time, De Humani Corporis Fabrica became a cornerstone of modern anatomy. Though Vesalius never lived to see it, his vision won. Today, Vesalius is remembered not only as a physician, but as a pioneer of truth through evidence. His drawings still astonish for their clarity and beauty. His writings remain a bridge between art and science, faith and reason. And his story offers a glimpse into the terrifying cost of challenging tradition in a world ruled by orthodoxy. In the Renaissance, the human body was more than biology. It was theology, politics, and fear bundled into flesh. To question its structure was to question the order of the cosmos. In the centuries that followed Vesalius's death, Europe transformed. But Vesalius remained, frozen in time, inked into the pages of his masterpiece. He was no longer seen as a blasphemer. He became the father of modern anatomy. What made De Humani Corporis Fabrica so revolutionary wasn't just its contents, it was its approach. Rather than rely on authority, it demanded verification. Rather than describe, it illustrated. It didn't just explain the body, it revealed it. But Vesalius's work remained controversial long after his death. And the question always lingered: was understanding worth the cost? Vesalius had believed it was. But he had also paid the price: inquisition, exile, isolation. Yet despite the fear, Vesalius showed that truth could be a form of worship too. Every medical student who learns human anatomy owes him a debt. Every textbook tracing nerves and arteries follows his path. Every drawing that balances clarity with beauty stands in his tradition. Today, there are statues of Andreas Vesalius. One stands in Brussels, not far from where he was born. Another graces the university town of Padua, where his dissections once scandalized and inspired. What we know is this: Vesalius broke a 1,000-year silence. He cracked the ribs of tradition and found that inside was not heresy, but truth. And in doing so, he proved that sometimes the truth takes sacrifice. If you have made it this far and enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure to comment your favorite Renaissance-era story for a chance of being featured.